Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Dave Starbuck. Hello, Dave, and welcome to Revelation Tapes.
Hello. I wondered who you was talking about then. What a build-up! What a build-up!
Well, absolutely. Okay, Dave. Well, it's been a couple of years since we last spoke, hasn't it? Really?
I think it's a bit longer than that.
About 3 years since I last had
the university, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Since I last had the pleasure of your company on one of my radio shows. So, I mean, over the last few years, a lot of things have happened. But just looking at what's going on in the world right at the moment, factually and politically, with just a low-level thing to kick us off with. Right here, right now, it's July the 19th, 2008, about 8 o'clock, to be precise. We have an American election coming up if we're looking at the news, and a British one probably to follow. How do you see things right now, July 19th? And how do you see things panning out politically, at least, over the next sort of months and years?
Well, at the moment, it's what I've been predicting for a while. It's meltdown time. To put it politely, the fertilizer is hitting the fan in all directions, especially financially and the housing market. The housing market is really on its knees. Regarding what you said, the forthcoming election, both in the United States and this country, people are increasingly distrustful of politicians now, like they are the mainstream media. This is why they're giving so many DVDs away, because they can't sell the newspapers. The insurance industry is also on its knees. I get at least 5 begging letters every week telling me how cheap it is to insure my house and so forth. But regarding leaders of state, they're only puppets anyway.
So you'd say, I mean, in terms of, for a lot of people, they look at the world and they see, Barack Obama, George Bush, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, and that these people are pretty much running the show. But in reality, you're saying these people aren't important?
No, they're just puppets. They do as they're told. They just do. Yeah. They just do as they're told.
Okay. So in terms of, one of the things we're going to be talking about today, just so the viewers are aware, is what we might say, what's going on in the world, or as I sometimes say, what's really going on in the world, and this idea of a sort of a global conspiracy or a global structure. That's often the idea of a pyramid is often used as a good way of explaining the system of control that operates in the world today. Would you go along with that?
Oh, absolutely, because it's a few people at the top of the pyramid. They're in full possession of the game plan.
Yeah.
The people at the bottom, it's compartmentalization, I think they call it. They only know so much. So it's a very apt illustration. It's only the people at the top who know. But little by little, thanks to the internet, the alternative.
Thanks to people like yourself.
Well, if you say it. There's more and more people becoming aware of what's going on. They're becoming disillusioned, especially the medical, I call it the medical mafia, and the pharmaceutical racket and so forth. There's more people becoming aware, quite a lot. They're going to self-denial. They don't want to know. They can't believe that the governments kill their own people and blow up buildings. And
well, just on that topic, there is something I want to ask you specifically on that. But just so we know where we are, what you're saying then is really, and a lot of people would back you up on this, that there's a very few at the top of the pyramid controlling a very many at the bottom of the pyramid, and the master servant almost relationship kind of thing. Yeah, the pyramid's quite big. There's lots of different levels.
Yes,
but we need to break that down. Now, there's one thing in the last sort of 3 years that I've really wanted to ask you and sort of confront a lot of people about this. At that time when I last spoke to you, it seemed that there was a lot of positive energy around. We had the massive smoking gun of 9/11 that was still quite fresh. It was still smoking, pretty much. All the evidence was there. It was so obviously a cover-up. The DVDs were circling. People were giving the DVDs away almost, yeah? This was going to be big. Things were going to happen. What happened?
Very little. It's people in informed circles, they're fully aware that 9/11 and 7/7 was a false flag. But the majority, they still believe the official version, which is...
So in other words, at that time, if you went out onto any high street, went to the high street here, or your local high street, whereabouts you are, and you asked 100 people who was responsible for 9/11, you'd either get, Osama bin Laden, Muslim terrorist, Saddam Hussein, whatever it was, yeah? So would it be fair to say if you went out now, all these years later and asked the same people, you'd get the same response, you think? You think that they'd... I mean, I can only assume that you would, I mean...
Well, put it this way, Gray. The ones who have seen some of our presentations, especially Loose Change, the second edition, and some more, the ones who have seen that will have a totally different opinion. But
I suppose it's the numbers, though, really, that letting us down. I mean, the greatest danger, as far as I can see, is that it's not that the people haven't seen them, it's when, and I'm sure a lot of people have experienced this, a lot of viewers have experienced this, is when people don't want to know.
Exactly.
I think that's the biggest danger. I mean, in terms of that, would you say that it's because people have been apathised into submission? I mean, do you have any views on the whole sort of dumbing down of society thing? Do you think there's a purposeful objective with vaccinations, artificial sweeteners, chemicals in the air, fluoride in the water? Do you think that plays a part in it, or...?
Very much so, to subdue people. And another one, very important, is mobile phones. I exposed mobile phones and microwaves, about 9-10 years ago, on a presentation called Deadlier Than the Age Beyond, The Terrifying Truth of Mobiles and Microwaves. They are really lethal. I do have one, but I only use it to text. Very sparing, very
I'll have to look out for that presentation. Yeah, I'm not...
I'll have to
look out for that. That sounds like an interesting one.
Dumbing down of society, magicians call it misdirection as well, because if people are so preoccupied with two people working, husband and wife working, and watching moronic soaps that pass themselves off as entertainment on the Idiot's Magic Lantern, they're not interested in what's really
absolutely.
happening.
Well, you made just an interesting thing I can pick you up on there is I think I once heard, this is from yourself, you once compared the illusion to a magic trick. You think it's only when you see through the trick that you realise it is a trick. Otherwise, it's magic, isn't it? Otherwise, you believe in it. You believe in it. I mean, you're a magician. I mean, you could maybe show us a trick today if you want. I mean, I don't know, but
I don't know. But,
you got something on you there?
No, I've got. Name a country.
I don't know. A friend of mine's just bought an apartment in Bulgaria, so we'll go for that.
Bulgaria.
Yeah.
Right. You want some Bulgarian money? Say hocus pocus. Give it a go.
Oh my God, folks! Right in front of my eyes. Well, that's pretty impressive.
Anyhow, that's...
well, absolutely. Well,
once you see through a trick, you can't be fooled by it again.
That's the point. That's the point. The problem is that people, number one, aren't seeing through the trick, and number two, there's such an amount of people who, from my experience, from your experience, I'm sure, don't want to see through the trick. They want to stay in their own little worlds. Yeah. The problem is, if we're going to be united, or if the human beings are going to be united confronting this evil, then it means coming together to a certain extent. It means uniting. And do you think that in terms of information there could be a problem with that? If some people, think that the government, certainly of this country and America, the government are the good guys.
Yeah,
that's a problem, surely.
A big problem. But they're not having everything quite their own way, because people are waking up. Not quick enough for me.
Yeah.
And as I say, it's like seeing through a magic trick, like they see through the lies in a controlled media and what I call bullshit time, the news, things like that.
Definitely, yeah. Now, when I spoke to you when I spoke to you last time, it was around the time that you first interviewed David Boyle, and this, we've talked about people not waking up and this kind of thing, but. In some respects there's a good reason for this, and because some of the information is very challenging, and I know that you were kind of introduced when you met David Boyle. I was there when you met him, actually, and the whole UFO thing came into your work, and I sensed at the time you were maybe uneasy about that. Looking back, how do you feel about that now?
Excuse me. Well, up to that time, UFOs was uncharted waters for me. My view at that time was we've got enough trouble with the people on this planet without worrying about ones from other galaxies. Yeah. But when I started to speak to people who've been involved, unrelated to each other, and they all had the same story to tell, in abductions and so forth, I did another presentation with David Boyle, The Truth About UFOs and ETs, and I've since interviewed other people who've had direct dialect experience, including myself, incidentally, I'll talk about in a moment. This led to other things, the underground bases, underground cities, and especially at Area 51 in New Mexico, the maglev trains that are capable of going anywhere in the world. I think it's Mach 2, twice the speed of sound.
Anywhere in the world?
Yeah, oh yeah. They go under the ocean. Yeah. These have been, and there's one in this country at Peasmore, I think it's in Berkshire. I interviewed a person, he worked as a security man on one of these bases, and one of my contacts in the United States, they sent me photographs. They go several levels down, up to I think about 12 miles deep, different levels, and some of these contain bases for UFOs. Yeah. And aliens and so forth.
Right, so you I mean, at the time, you know, when I was speaking to you at the time, you were, you know, like I say, you were unsure, but now you're pretty much a believer in alien races and in an alien agenda, and maybe as part of this pyramid that we talked about at the start.
Yes.
That aliens are also involved in the pyramid at some levels.
Unequivocally.
Right, okay, well that's very interesting. Now, if we can continue along this theme, you've interviewed a lot of people, Dave, and at the moment it seems to me that there's two kinds of people or two camps in terms of people investigating or speaking about this idea of a global conspiracy, because as you know, there's a lot of people talking about it. Now, on the one hand, you have the people who are dealing with what we could call solid facts.
Yes.
You know, for example, a good example would be 9/11, where buildings don't collapse at the speed of gravity without demolition explosives. That, you know, it's a law of gravity. It's a provable fact. But then there's other people who, shall we say, are talking about things that are a lot less provable, that require a lot more of a leap of faith, especially when we're talking about alien races, as we've been talking about. Basically, non-provable stuff, or at least not proved at the moment. You've interviewed both these kind of people. I wonder what your take on that is. Do you think that some people are going too far? For example, if we say that David Boyle was the most controversial person you spoke to last time, then surely James Casbold is the most controversial person since that time. Would you agree with that?
Oh no, since then I've interviewed quite a few more. One of the most controversial in recent times is a former Lieutenant Colonel of the Royal Air Force, in the American Air Force, Lieutenant Colonel Gregg. He agreed to go public. It's under the title Government Assassin, and I think that is probably one of the most controversial presentations I've done. Among other things, this man, he holds the world record for a single shot at 7,000 yards. That is a long way.
Yeah.
And he's taken out hundreds of people, paedophiles, drug barons, and so forth. It's on Government Assassin.
Right, okay, yeah.
The other person, Colonel Gregg, he lives in North Carolina. The other person lives in Mexico, a man called Jack Buckman, and I interviewed him on a topic called Project Bluebeam, which it was quite interesting, and the essence of it covers a hell of a lot of topics, underground bases and so forth. But the main one was an Operation Bluebeam. You know these chemtrails that you see, apart from dropping peptides and making people ill and things like that.
Yeah.
They put a film on the sky, so it looks a clear blue sky, and on this, the powers that be, and they've had this technology for a long time, they can project holograms onto this in 3 dimensions. That they can be photographed. They can be photographed.
Holograms of what exactly? What do you mean?
UFOs, anything.
Right,
Onto the sky, and you look up at the sky, oh look, there's a UFO. Yeah. And his contention is that about 98% of what people think are UFOs are just
just to stop you there, Dave, you did mention just a few minutes ago you had a UFO experience. Am I correct in saying? Could you maybe talk us through that now? Or?
Yeah. I'll just finish this first, Gray. 98% are illusions. The rest are genuine. They do exist. Yeah. And taking you upon the point you just mentioned, on the 8th of July, a couple of years ago, as a matter of fact, I was due to come up to Blackpool to New Horizons, and it was just before midnight. And during the summertime, I never draw my curtains. Yeah. And in the living room, I looked out, and it was a bit like a scene from Pinocchio. There was like a star in the distance, and it came closer and closer and closer and closer until it was maybe about 150 yards from my front window. Yeah. And it was an egg. It was an egg. Now, half of it was dark, and the other was an orangey colour. and it wasn't an illusion.
Yeah.
I had a drink, but I wasn't drunk.
Yeah.
So it was about 1:45, and I rang up James Casbolt, the former MI6 man, because he's a direct dealings with these, aliens and so forth. I rang him up, and I told him what had happened, and I got my tape recorder, and I gave a commentary on what I saw, and the light part, as I said, this egg, half of it was dark, and the other half was like an orangey colour, and on the orangey colour it was like a window open, and inside it was like not a doctor's surgery, an operating theatre, and there was an operating table. I couldn't make out, there was a being at either side, and it was a human laid on this operating table, and I'm giving James Caswell a commentary on this. Wow. As it was happening, and then the aperture, whatever it was, it closed, and then it started to go away. So I said to James, I've still got the tape at home somewhere, if I can find it. I've got hundreds of tapes. And I said to James, it's going away. He said, well, contact him. I said, how can I contact him? I don't know the bloody phone number. And he said, telepathically, and ask him to come back. Ask him to come back. So I did. I sent out some thoughts, and after maybe a minute or two, it started to come back, and I said, it's coming back. I got the tape recorder going all the time, and he said, well, ask him to open a window. I said, well, they do open a window. He said, well, ask him to give you another sign. And the front part, the orangey part, it turned to a yellow, and it turned forward, so that the front part was facing me, and like a window open, and there was a human face at the front looking straight at me from the front, and I was describing all this as it was happening, and then it closed, and it turned round so that you could just see the yellow and black on this egg. David Boyle, incidentally, said it's quite common with UFOs in the shape of an egg. And get this one. It's when I described to James Caswell, I thought he'll think I'm drunk out of my bloody mind. It changed into a skull, right? Yeah. And he said, they can shapeshift, Dave. They can shapeshift. He said the technology is years, sometimes thousands of years ahead of us. It shapeshifted into a skull, and then the skull turned upside down, right? And then there was fire came out of the mouth, right, out of its mouth. Wow. It turned back again, then went back into an egg, and then went. And I could have cursed myself because I hadn't got a damn camera. If I'd got a camera going back to your question, so that wasn't an illusion. Some of them may be illusions, and they could be explained underneath, but that wasn't.
Wow, no, that's quite a significant, for you, I imagine that's quite a significant happening in the last time since we've spoken. I mean, there's a personal experience.
Oh yeah. In fact, in short, there's nothing like the human eyeball for assessing a situation.
Absolutely. Just if I can pick up something that you did say there, I mean, I'm talking about it being a leap of faith for a lot of people to accept this. So you can understand people, getting into this put off in some ways. Now, I have to cover this guy, James Casbolt. I haven't met him myself, but I've listened to the presentations you've done with him. I've seen his website. There's a lot of people saying he's going too far. What are your views on that? I mean, obviously, you know the guy. Do you think that some of the things maybe he's talking about are a bit...
Well, James Casbolt, as you know, is a former MI6, but I've spoken to him only on things that he's had personal experience. Right, okay. And he sent me photographs. He sent me photographs that were took in his flat of reptilians.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And in his garden, and you can discern these. It's in its turn, he has put me onto some other people, but on certain matters, he knows what he's talking about.